Hi friends, I'm Sarah Jo Strawberry, and you are awesome simply for being here. And I don't mean here watching this video, I mean here, living, existing. Look, it's not easy out there for any of us. It's a struggle, but I'm proud of you for still being here. Today, we are still talking about The Princess Bride. Where my other Princess Bride video was fixated more on the book in relation to the movie, today we're going to be talking more so about the movie, but touching on the book. And where that piece was a bit more fluff and a surface level exploration of the different details in the book and film, we're going to be taking a much deeper look at the story. And I actually, ahead of making this video, started thinking about it as I was editing that other video and ended up basically for myself as research writing an almost 9-page essay about The Princess Bride. Maybe I'll publish it somewhere at some point, but this is going to be one of my truest video essays in that it started as a written essay, and I am just very excited to share it with you all. And what we'll be discussing today is The Princess Bride and how it explores the meaning of love. Also, I apologize, there's going to be a lot of me looking down at my notes at this essay of mine. I was going to condense it down into like bullet points and stuff, but that doesn't really work for me. And also, I mentioned in that other video that it was a celebration of Rob Reiner's legacy, but I think this video will be even more so because it focuses more on the film. I really wanted to just celebrate and talk about this beautiful story, both the book and the film. Two things that stand on their own. I think that's very important to say up front, and we'll talk about that more in a bit. But yeah, I love The Princess Bride. I spent plenty of time in that other video gushing about The Princess Bride and my personal history with it, so check that out if you're curious. The Princess Bride has long been categorized as a romantic, adventure, fantasy, comedy film, but in reality, calling it romance is a false notion, in my opinion. It goes far beyond exploring romance and looks at 6 different relationships and examples of love. It exemplifies ways to show up for those we love and show them that we care, as well as some contrasting relationships to give us some insight into missteps we may take in our relationships. The love story that at first glance seems like the most central and most important is arguably possibly the least important and the least central to the story, while others that may not even be immediately considered are the ones that help to define what the story is trying to say about love. Comparing and contrasting the film and the 1973 novel upon which it's based is important in helping to lay some groundwork for this argument. The central story in both the book and film is S. Morgan Stern's The Princess Bride. S. Morgan Stern, just if you've ever been confused or are confused, not a real person. He is himself a character of sorts within all of this. In both the film and book, we never see S. Morgan Stern's unadulterated story. Both are abridgments and retellings by other people of this story. In the book, William Goldman is himself a character, a writer abridging the original fictional S. Morgan Stern story. He leaves out chunks of the original text, replacing them with a summary of the excluded sections and his thoughts on them. We also see his commentary in other parts of the book. In the movie, S. Morgan Stern's The Princess Bride is being read by a grandfather to his grandson, and in turn to the audience. Both characters insert their commentary and sort of have a sense of control over the story and its flow. For example, when the story pauses just before the fire swamp scene, as the grandson asks to skip the kissing part, and the grandfather humors him, flipping through the pages to move on to the next chapter. These two frameworks we are presented with serve as instructions for how we are meant to interpret the meaning and the notion of love, the exploration of love that both the novel and film explore. The first love story to explore is the most obvious one, and with hindsight, perhaps the least important: Westley and Buttercup. While their relationship is better explored in the book and their characters are better developed, Buttercup in particular, their story is more sidelined here to give way to the other relationships presented and to give them more of a spotlight, as well as to contrast against them. It's also important to consider that the film was in part meant to be a pastiche and parody of classic swashbuckler films of the 1930s and 40s. As an example, Wesley is very heavily inspired by Errol Flynn. There is a passing resemblance between Errol Flynn and Carrie Elway, but it is very much emphasized by Wesley's mustache that is very much an Errol Flynn mustache. So the film's representation of romance could also be seen as reflective of the way romances were portrayed in old Hollywood films, which is a kind way of saying outdated. And of course, I watch a lot of old movies. I really love, especially like Bette Davis.
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
And there are plenty of films out there that do have a much more realistic and grounded exploration of romance and other topics, but it just was not as common. It's far more nuanced now. So with these things in mind, it kind of helps to show that Wesley and Buttercup's romance is a bit of a smokescreen to put up a veneer of this notion of romance and pull the rug out from under you a bit as you realize it's about far more than that. As a heroine, Buttercup is lacking. When we first meet Buttercup, she is an entitled brat. She plays hard to get and negs Wesley.
Our favorite pastimes were riding a horse and tormenting the farm boy that worked there. His name was Wesley, but she never called him that.
On the other hand, Wesley loves Buttercup wholly and unconditionally in spite of her horrendous treatment of him. Buttercup eventually learns to love Wesley, only to lose him thinking he's died. Though she gets him back in the end, the period of years she spent mourning Wesley almost serve as a punishment for her poor treatment of him. A harsh teaching of the lesson, you don't know what you've got until it's gone. She resigns herself to never loving again and is forced into marrying Prince Humperdinck. The superficiality of her love for Wesley is spotlighted when he, as the Man in Black, tracks the kidnapped Buttercup and the Sicilian crowd. Buttercup is blindfolded, and surely she would recognize the voice of her beloved. I understand that at this point she believes he's dead, so it might be strange to question that hearing his voice or a familiar voice wouldn't make her think, wait a second, but I mean, this year will make 25 years since my Vavo passed away, my paternal grandmother, and to this day, there are times when I'm just out and I hear someone whose voice sounds similar to her and it gets my attention. I turn around, I look for the source of the voice. I know she's dead, but there's still something about it, even 25 years later, that it grabs your attention. You notice it. Maybe in her proclamation of never loving again, she closed her heart up so entirely as to also lay to rest her love for Wesley. The next moment, however, is one that has always baffled me, even when I was a little kid watching this movie. And I think it's intentional to show just how blind to love Buttercup is, and how, dare I say, stupid she is. After her blindfold is removed, she bravely stares the Man in Black in the eyes that are framed and highlighted by his black mask, and tells him of her love for Wesley. The one physical descriptor of Wesley she gives, one that she clearly counts among things she loves most about him, is of his eyes. So, she is looking him in the eyes, and explaining Wesley's eyes. She's looking in the eyes she's describing, and doesn't recognize they're the same eyes? She only realizes the Man in Black is Wesley immediately after hearing him say, "As you wish." Third time's the charm, I suppose. Following this, as they enter the fire swamp, Wesley cracks a joke in an attempt to alleviate some of the tension and anxiety, and Buttercup gives him a look that I can only describe as hateful. She doesn't even humor him with a laugh or a light chuckle. Anyone who's never seen the movie or read the book could be forgiven for if they just saw this one moment assuming that Buttercup loathes Wesley. The only person she has ever loved has just effectively come back from the dead. Even if she doesn't find the joke funny, you'd think she would still humor him with a giggle, just because she's overjoyed that her true love, the love of her life, is alive and is there with her after, in the movie, 5 years apart. In this same scene, Wesley mentions that Ryan, the Dread Pirate Roberts from whom he inherited the mantle of Dread Pirate Roberts, showed him mercy in part because of his description of Buttercup's beauty. Nothing else about her, just her looks. It's safe to assume that his love for her was based solely in her looks, because her initial attitudes toward him are very unattractive. Buttercup's description of Wesley is also surface level. Perhaps their relationship is based more in lust than love. In the latter part of the story, Buttercup is effectively a damsel in distress who waits for Wesley to rescue her and resigns herself to death when he doesn't arrive to stop her and Humperdinck's wedding. And she believes he has given up on her, despite the many times he said and proven that he would always come back for her. Not even death stopped him.
Told you I would always come for you. Why didn't you wait for me?
Well, you were dead.
Death cannot stop true love. All it can do is delay it for a while.
I'll never doubt again.
He didn't come.
But that's not good enough for Buttercup.
It's not matter where you take me. There's no greater hunter than Prince Humperdinck. He can track a falcon on a cloudy day. He can find you.
While Wesley and Buttercup do have their moments of making sacrifices for each other and get their happily ever after, there's still something superficial, unearned, and downright naive to their romance. Where Wesley's love is unconditional from the start, Buttercup seems to love conditionally, although in fairness, her nightmare shows an underlying sense of guilt, hinting at a subconscious understanding that she has gone about things the wrong way, but still fails to understand which thing it was she approached incorrectly. Theirs is a very unbalanced and, dare I say, toxic relationship. The second love story to discuss is, I think, the most unexpected and one that fans probably wouldn't immediately think of when considering the relationships and love stories of The Princess Bride, Buttercup and Humperdinck. And this is one I hardly gave consideration to previously, but upon further reflection, I realize it's actually incredibly important and provides a foundation for how the overall story regards love. To start, it's the title relationship of The Princess Bride. Buttercup is both a princess and a bride because of Humperdinck and her relationship with him. Theirs is a marriage of convenience, and particularly in the book, they openly have no love for each other. And this is actually interesting in, again, talking about book versus movie. Book Humperdinck doesn't care whether or not Buttercup loves him, but movie Humperdinck says that she will learn to love him, emphasizing his ego and narcissism, while also taking more time than the book to reveal his sociopathy and the depths of it. Despite Wesley's point after the fact that Buttercup and Humperdinck aren't technically married, it still serves as the central marriage of the film, again, going back to the title, and the only other two marriages we see in the movie are King Lotheron and Queen Bella, which their names aren't even said in the movie, so it's almost not worth mentioning. But there are some interesting details about them in the book. And Miracle, Max, and Valerie. Buttercup and Humperdinck's sham marriage helps to indicate that the film's notion of romantic love is not what it seems, and alongside Wesley and Buttercup's relationship, further illustrates that this movie isn't about romance. It's about love. The third love story to look at is one I mentioned a moment ago, and that is Miracle, Max, and Valerie. And they appear very briefly in the film, just one quick scene, but they leave a lasting impact. There's so many beloved quotes from this movie that are often repeated, and a number of them come from this brief scene. And I actually didn't even consider them at first when I was first putting this together, and as I was going, thought about it more and realized that they are important to look at when we're looking at this context and concept of love. They are your typical old married couple, riling each other up when we first see them, but it's clear they operate as a team and share a lot of love between them. Though not in the gentlest way, and perhaps because after years together, she understands that tough love is what will work best for Max, Valerie helps to boost his shattered confidence and helps push him toward providing a miracle to help save Wesley. The fourth love story we're going to talk about is another short one because it really plays off scene, and that is Inigo Montoya and his father, Domingo Montoya. At the time of the film, Domingo has been dead for 20 years, but he's ever present nonetheless. Inigo's entire motivation is out of love for his father, determined to avenge his death and dedicating his life from the moment of his father's death when he was 11 years old to that mission. His love and respect for his father's craft as a blacksmith defines Inigo's life. It's also insinuated that his father's spirit guides Inigo and Fezzik to Wesley to help save him from the pit of despair and carry on their respective journeys. The fifth love story to explore, and One of my favorites, one that I think is among the more important ones, is the brotherhood of Inigo and Fezzik. Their friendship is a great example of true unconditional love. They meet each other at their respective level, neither judging the other, which is a new experience for them both. And this is another point where we're going to look at the book a bit more, because the book gives some really great insight and background on both of these characters. Others look down on Inigo due to the two things that fuel his life: alcohol and his obsession with finding the six-fingered man. When Fezzik finds Inigo drunk in the thieves' forest, he doesn't admonish him for falling off the wagon. He takes him to safety and lovingly nurses him back to health.
That's enough! That's enough!
After Vicini's death, Fezzik is adrift and looking for another job, simply to make enough money to survive, with no other motivation. His lack of an ulterior motive shows that him being more than happy to support and join his friend on his mission to avenge his father's murder is a truly selfless act. Where others look down on Inigo, they look up at Fezzik in fear of his strength and size, though he is the true definition of a gentle giant. Those who get past the first appearance and speak with him assume he is dumb, but he is in fact quite intelligent and especially emotionally intelligent, but struggles to voice his thoughts. For much of his life, his love of rhyming is treated as part of his perceived stupidity, and prior to meeting Inigo, he keeps it hidden. However, it is something that simply brings him joy, and Inigo inherently understands this, opening the door for him to express that joy, especially when he's feeling down. Rhyming is an expression of love and care between them. The sixth, final, and arguably most important love story to look at, I'm sure you're sitting there wondering when I was going to talk about this, is the grandfather and grandson. And this is another key distinction between the book and the movie. This framing of the grandfather and grandson, as I said at the beginning, is unique to the film. It also sets up how we should interpret the movie's take on love. It's a kissing book, as the grandson says, downplaying the romantic element to simply kissing. It can be taken as the boy downplaying romance because that's what little boys do or whatever, but the grandfather responding to keep his shirt on and wait for the story to actually begin can be seen as an invitation to the audience to look past the romance and seek out the true meaning it's trying to impart through the grandfather himself. Another moment that gives a hint as to how to see the story is during the fake-out wedding in Buttercup's nightmare, when the grandson says it isn't fair that Buttercup marries Humperdinck after Wesley did so much for her. This lens that Wesley and Buttercup should be married, not because of their love for one another, but because of one-sided acts, boils their relationship down to being as transactional as Buttercup and Humperdinck's, treating the notion of romantic love as childish. Aside from framing how to view the rest of the story, theirs serves as an example of a relationship that is based in true unconditional love. The reading of the book is in itself an act of love as well. Nowadays, we are very familiar with both fictional and real-world examples of familial cycles of abuse. However, this story gives us an example of a familial cycle of care. The grandfather's father read the book to him whenever he was sick as a child, and in turn, the grandfather has done the same for both his son and grandson. This story is deemed important enough by generations of this family that it must be passed down. The film also doesn't end on the happily ever after kiss that so many romances do. That's where the kissing book ends. The film ends with the grandfather saying to the grandson the phrase that is established early on as the film's way of saying I love you.
As you wish.
Throughout The Princess Bride, love is treated as a strength, and one that can be wielded against those who see it as a weakness and emasculating. The most loving characters, Wesley, Inigo, Fezzik, are also the strongest, while those like Humperdinck are portrayed as weak, performing power and strength without genuinely having any. The Princess Bride is a meditation on the meaning of love, true love, presenting it as something we should shamelessly express to those we care about, and as something that we should always lead with. So there are my thoughts on what the true meaning of The Princess Bride is and what it's trying to say about love. I said it so many times before, but I adore this movie. I think it really is a true masterpiece in the canon of Rob Reiner's work and in all of film, as well as in the canon of William Goldman's work. So anyway, that will be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here again. And, you know, like button, the subscribe, the comments, the hype, the notification bell, blah, blah, blah. Whatever. Just thank you. And I'll see you next time. So long, farewell, la vidas, and goodbye. Goodbye.
You be careful. People in masks cannot be trusted.
As her initial attitude, the six figure. I did that in the last one too. And fish. Say hi. Hi to the people. Hi to the people. I'm a good man. I don't know if you're behind the camera. Behind the camera?